A man who built a $4 million project just found out a 13-year-old girl's barn stops all of it. She didn't buy that barn. He gave it to her as a joke, and she's been waiting 3 years to make him pay for it. Harlan Dietz had been a corporate lawyer for 19 years, and he had never once called a client before 7 a.m. He called Nolan Kemper at 6:52. The project was frozen. Meridian Ag Holdings had $43 million committed to a regional grain processing campus on the old Kemper footprint in Boone County, Nebraska. Groundbreaking was 11 days out. Permits were pulled, contractors were staged, and the county had just issued a stop work notice tied to a conflicting access easement on the eastern boundary. The easement was registered in 1974. The easement had never been vacated, and the strip of land it crossed belonged to a girl named Clara Voss. Clara was 16 years old. Nolan Kemper sat in his truck in his own driveway and said nothing for a long time. He remembered the day he gave it to her. Boone County holds its tax-delinquent land auction every August in the parking lot behind the assessor's office. They set up 3 folding tables end to end and run extension cords to a microphone nobody needs because the crowd never tops 30 people. Somebody always brings a coffee pot. The coffee is always bad. August 12, 2021. 41 parcels. One afternoon. Clara Voss was 13 years old. She stood at the edge of the crowd, in a green jacket 2 sizes too big, next to her grandfather, Earl Voss, who was 71, and moved slowly, and had been coming to this auction for 20 years. Clara had never been before. She stood still and watched the auctioneer work through the list. Nolan Kemper was there too. Nolan Kemper was 54 years old. He ran Kemper Grain and Storage, which had been the biggest agricultural operation in Boone County for 3 decades. He wore a clean flannel shirt and good boots, and stood near the coffee pot with his arms crossed. He told himself he had come to see what the market looked like. He had owned the Voss parcel, all 240 acres, until 2018, when a run of bad contracts had let the county take it for unpaid taxes. It still embarrassed him. He did not like to think about it. He stayed because he liked to watch other people's business. Lot 22. The Voss parcel. 240 acres, eastern Boone County, access road off Route 9. The auctioneer read it flat. No improvements. No water lines. Long idle ag land, with a rough drainage ditch along the eastern edge. Nobody moved. The auctioneer looked up. Earl Voss raised his hand and said $800. Nolan Kemper turned his head. He looked at the old man. Then he looked at the girl beside him. She was short. She had her hands in the pockets of that big green jacket, and she was not looking at Kemper. She was looking at the auctioneer. Kemper made a sound. It started in his chest and came out of his nose. Not quite a laugh. He said, "Pass. Let the kid have it." 2 or 3 men nearby heard him. One of them smiled. Another one shook his head, the way men shake their heads when something is too easy to bother explaining. The auctioneer's hammer came down. $800. Earl Voss signed the transfer form at the folding table. He listed himself as trustee of the Voss Family Trust. He listed Clara as the sole beneficiary. Clara stood next to him while he signed. She watched the pen move. When the county clerk stamped the deed and handed over the receipt, Earl folded it once and tucked it into the inside pocket of his jacket. Clara watched him do that too. Kemper had already walked back to his truck. He did not say goodbye to anyone. He did not look at the folding tables again. A strip of worn-out ground had gone for $800 to an old man and a child, and that was the end of it as far as Nolan Kemper was concerned. He drove home thinking about dinner. Clara did not speak on the drive back either. Earl kept both hands on the wheel and the radio low. Outside, the county road ran flat between fields that had been cut down to stubble. Clara watched them pass. After a while, Earl said, "Good land for somebody patient." Clara said, "I know." That was all. That night she sat at the kitchen table alone after Earl had gone to bed. She had a notebook in front of her and a pencil and a cup of water that had gone warm. The notebook was the same one her older cousin Theo had given her the previous Christmas. Brown cover, grid paper inside, his name still written on the first page, crossed out, and her name written below it. She opened it to the first clean page. She wrote a number at the top. Below it, she wrote a road number, a year, a deed book reference, a page number. She wrote one short sentence under all of it. And then she closed the notebook. She had been to the county library 4 times in the 6 weeks before the auction. She had read records that had not been touched in decades. She had found something in those records that nobody at the auction knew. Not the auctioneer, not the men who smiled at Kemper's joke, not Kemper himself, not even Earl. She put the notebook in the drawer under the workbench in the barn. Then she went to bed. Nolan Kemper had just handed her exactly what she needed, and he had done it for free, and he had laughed while he did it. Clara had not laughed. She had simply waited for August. Before this story gets any bigger, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. What Clara does next is something nobody in that parking lot could have predicted. June 7th, 2021. Rutherford County Public Library, 9:18 a.m. A manila folder sat open on the microfiche table. Inside it, a photocopy of a county road resolution from 1968, a water drainage registration form from October 1974, and 3 pages of handwritten notes in small, even print. Clara had been here since the library opened. She was 13. She had a pencil behind her ear and a library card she had owned since she was 7. The librarian at the front desk, a woman named Doris, had shown her the deed index on her second visit and then stopped asking questions. Some children asked for help. This one asked for the index room key and a clean table. Clara worked slowly. She did not rush. The county deed index ran from 1903 forward. The older records were on film. Clara had started with 1965 and worked forward year by year, looking for anything tied to the eastern boundary of the parcel her grandfather had been watching for 2 years. She almost missed it. October 14th, 1974. Book 44, page 312. A drainage easement. Registered by Kemper Grain and Storage, original operator of record, under the Federal Water Pollution Control Act, as expanded that year. The easement ran 12 feet wide along the eastern boundary of what was then Kemper-owned land. It crossed the property line and connected to a county drainage tile buried under Route 9. The tile carried water off 300 acres of Kemper cropland. The easement ran with the land. It had never been vacated. Clara read it twice. Then she read it a third time. She wrote down the book number, the page number, the date, the registered width, the length, 840 feet, the connection point, the drainage tile at the Route 9 shoulder, 1.2 miles east of the Boone County line. She sat back. She looked at the ceiling for a moment. Then she wrote one more thing in her notebook. Any future owner of the Kemper footprint who needs that tile has to cross the eastern strip to reach it. There is no other route. The county road sits on the north. A wetland buffer sits on the south. The tile is the only drainage outlet for the entire East Campus. She closed the notebook. She sat with that for a while. Then she put the folder back in the return slot, signed out of the index room, waved to Doris, and rode her bike home. The kitchen table had a crack running 6 inches from the left edge. Clara had known that crack her whole life. She spread her notes across it that evening while Earl ate his soup. A kettle sat on the back burner with the heat on low. Outside, the August light was going orange. Earl looked at the notes. He said, "What are you seeing?" She pointed to the hand-drawn map she had made. The Kemper footprint on the left, large and irregular. The Voss parcel on the right, smaller and narrower. A dotted line along the eastern edge of the Kemper land, the drainage corridor. A circle at the bottom where it hit Route 9. She said, "This line has to go through our strip to work." Earl studied it. He said, "And if someone buys the Kemper land and wants to build something big," she said, "they need to cross us." The kettle started to whistle. Earl got up to move it. He didn't say anything else. He set 2 cups on the counter and poured without measuring. He understood enough. The months that followed were quiet ones. Clara went back to school. She did her homework. She helped Earl with the barn on weekends, but twice a month she drove with Earl along Route 9 and she watched. September 2021, survey flags appeared on the western edge of the old Kemper fields, orange ones. October 2021, a white pickup she didn't recognize sat parked on the shoulder for 3 days running. Different driver each time. Each one walked the same line. The northern boundary, the access road, the eastern edge. November 2021, the county recorder's public database showed a new LLC had purchased the 2 parcels directly north of the Kemper footprint. The LLC was registered in Delaware. The registered agent was a law firm in Omaha. Clara wrote all of it in the notebook. The notebook had Theo's crossed-out name on the cover and Clara's name beneath it. By November, it had 31 pages of notes, land parcel numbers, LLC filings, dates, measurements, a running list of every truck she had seen on Route 9 that hadn't been there the year before. She kept it in the barn drawer. February 2022. She found the last piece she needed, not at the library, at home. On the county's public GIS mapping tool, which had been updated over the winter to include infrastructure overlays, she pulled up the drainage tile network for eastern Boone County. The tile under Route 9 showed as active, maintained by the county. Diameter, 36 inches. Installed, 1961. Last inspected, 2019. She pulled up the Kemper footprint. She pulled up the proposed development overlay, a planning document Meridian Ag Holdings had submitted to the county in January 2022, proposing a regional processing campus on the former Kemper land, plus 2 adjacent parcels they had recently acquired. The processing campus needed stormwater drainage for 180,000 square feet of impervious surface. The only compliant drainage outlet within the project boundary was the tile under Route 9. The tile could only be accessed through the eastern corridor. The corridor was registered under Book 44, page 312. The corridor crossed the Voss parcel. Clara sat at the kitchen table with the laptop and her notebook. The house was quiet. Earl was asleep. The crack in the table ran from left to right the way it always had. She looked at the hand-drawn map she had made 8 months ago. She looked at the GIS overlay on the screen. They were the same drawing. She closed the notebook. Without that 12-foot strip, Meridian's campus couldn't drain. Without drainage, it couldn't pass county inspection. Without inspection, it couldn't open. The $43 million they were about to spend would sit on land that couldn't legally operate. And the strip was hers. A knock at the door on a Saturday morning, and the man standing on the porch was too well dressed for Boone County. He had product in his hair. He held a clipboard. His name was Bryce, and he worked for a real estate firm out of Lincoln, and he smiled the way people smile when they think a number is going to do the work for them. He said he represented an investment group that was quietly assembling agricultural land in the county. He said the group had identified the Voss parcel as a possible fit. He said the group was prepared to offer $290,000. Clara stood at the door in a flannel shirt and socks. She said, "No." Bryce kept smiling. He said the parcel had been assessed at $180,000. He said $290,000 was well above fair market. He said the group understood the land had sentimental value, and they respected that. Clara said, "It's not for sale." Bryce wrote something on his clipboard. He left a business card on the porch railing. He drove a silver sedan, and it disappeared down the road in 2 minutes. Clara put the business card in the barn drawer. She did not write it in the notebook. It wasn't worth a page yet. Earl died in March 2022. Heart, a Tuesday morning. He was in the chair by the window the way he always was with his coffee, and then he was not. Clara was 14. She inherited the trust outright. She kept the barn. She kept the notebook. She kept the coat, with the receipt still folded in the inside pocket. She hired a mowing service to cut the eastern strip twice a year. She paid the annual property tax herself, $214 every April, on time, by check, with a note in her register. She kept the markers clear. The world kept moving. Clara kept watching. August 2022. The County Planning Board voted to approve Meridian's campus application in principle, pending drainage review. Clara read the meeting minutes online. She made one note, drainage review pending. She closed the notebook. March 2023. A phone call. Blocked number. A man who introduced himself as a representative of the Boone County Economic Development Commission. Very formal, very measured. He said the commission was facilitating a land assembly project in the Eastern Corridor. He said the Voss parcel had come up in their review. He said the commission had engaged an independent appraiser and the parcel had come in at $410,000. He said the commission would like to meet. Clara said, "I'm not available for a meeting." The man said he understood and would follow up by letter. The letter arrived 12 days later. Clara read it. She filed it in a folder labeled in small handwriting, "Offers." She did not call back. Her mother, Diane, found the folder on the kitchen table one evening and opened it without asking. She read the letter. She set it down. She said, "That's a lot of money." Clara said, It's not the right kind. Diane looked at her daughter for a moment. She said, "Okay." That was the whole conversation. Diane had been watching Clara work quietly for 2 years, and she had stopped asking her to explain herself. Some people needed to talk through what they knew. Clara was not one of those people. A memory from 2 winters back, December 2021. Clara had been 13. She and Diane had driven past the Voss parcel on a Sunday afternoon, the strip running bare and brown along the Route 9 shoulder, and Diane's daughter, Clara's younger sister Nora, who was 9 at the time, had pressed her nose to the car window and said, "Why do we keep looking at the ditch?" Clara had said, "It's not a ditch." Nora had said, "What is it?" Clara had said, "A door." Nora hadn't understood. She went back to her book. Clara had filed that conversation away without explanation. 300 miles south, in an Omaha conference room on the 41st floor, Nolan Kemper sat across from 2 Meridian executives and a project manager named Phil. Phil was explaining that the drainage review had stalled. The county was asking for easement documentation on the eastern corridor. Meridian's title search had surfaced a 1974 filing that their acquisition team had not flagged. Kemper said, "What does that mean?" Phil said it meant the eastern corridor was encumbered. It meant the project's drainage infrastructure depended on a strip of land Meridian did not own and could not build through without either purchasing or licensing access. Kemper asked who owned the strip. Phil checked his notes. He said, "A trust. Clara Voss, beneficiary. She's 16. Kemper was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I know that name. November 2023. The third knock. This one came on a Wednesday. No clipboard. No silver sedan. A black SUV. A man in a charcoal suit with a leather briefcase, who introduced himself as Warren Ogle, attorney for Meridian Ag Holdings. He did not smile. He asked if he could come in. Clara let him in. She poured coffee. She set a cup in front of him at the kitchen table. She sat down across from him. He said Meridian understood there were complications with the eastern corridor. He said Meridian wanted to resolve those complications directly. He said Meridian was prepared to make a significant offer. He said $780,000. Clara wrapped both hands around her own cup. She said, "I'm not selling." Ogle said he appreciated that. He said he wanted her to understand the scope of what Meridian was building. He said this project would generate 300 jobs in the county. He said $780,000 for a strip of old drainage land was a number she would not see again. Clara said, "You might be surprised." Ogle wrote something in a small leather notebook. He closed it. He stood. He picked up his briefcase. He said, "We'll be in touch." The SUV was gone before the coffee had cooled. Clara washed the cups. She dried them and put them back in the cabinet. She went to the barn. She opened the drawer. She took out the notebook and wrote, "Third offer, $780K. Ogle, Meridian Council." Refused. She flipped back to the first page. The easement reference number. Book 44, page 312. October 1974. She closed the notebook. Outside, a cold November rain had started against the barn roof. Clara sat in the quiet for a minute. She thought about Nora's question from 2 winters ago. Why do we keep looking at the ditch? She thought about her answer. A door. She turned the barn light off and walked back to the house. 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday morning, her phone rang. Unknown number. She looked at it for 2 rings. She looked at the November fields out the kitchen window. She picked it up. Warren Ogle's voice came through the phone before Clara had finished saying hello. He said, "We'd like to revisit the conversation." Clara set her coffee cup down on the counter. She said, "I'm listening." Ogle said Meridian's board had authorized him to discuss alternatives to a full purchase. He said the word alternatives the way men say words they have been told to say. He said Meridian was open to a licensing arrangement. He said he would like to meet again. Clara said, "I'll have my attorney contact you." She hung up. She stood at the counter for a moment. Then she called Nora. Nora Voss was 23. She had finished her law degree 8 months earlier and was working at a property rights firm in Omaha. She had driven back to Boone County 4 times in the last year to sit with Clara at the kitchen table and read through the notebook. She drove back on a Saturday. She spread the permit file across the table. Next to it, she laid the original deed, the county transfer signed by Earl at the folding table. Next to that, the notebook. And at the top of the pile, The photocopy of Book 44, page 312. Nora read for 40 minutes without speaking. Then she said, "They filed an abandonment claim." Clara said, "When?" Nora said, 6 weeks ago. County court. They're arguing the easement lapsed because Kemper stopped using the corridor after 2009 when they consolidated their drainage to the north. Clara said, "Check 2014. Nora pulled up the county road maintenance database on her laptop. She typed for 30 seconds. She stopped typing. She said the county mowed and cleared the 12-foot corridor in April and September 2014. Riparian buffer maintenance, federally required. The maintenance record lists the 1974 easement by book and page as the legal basis for county access. She looked at Clara. She said, "They maintained it. That resets the abandonment clock." Clara said, "I know." Nora closed the laptop. She said, "I'll make the call." The hearing was scheduled for a Wednesday in February. Rutherford County Civil Court. Fluorescent lights. 5 rows of benches. 3 people in the gallery. Diane in the front row, Theo behind her with his hands folded, and a local reporter who wrote for the Boone County Register and had driven 40 minutes because he had heard something interesting was happening. Meridian's legal team sat at the plaintiff's table. Ogle, 2 associates, a junior paralegal with a rolling cart. Nora sat at the defendant's table. Clara sat next to her. Nora placed 3 documents in front of the judge. She said, "The first document is the original 1974 registration. Book 44, page 312. The easement exists and is on record." She said, "The second document is a 2009 compliance filing submitted by Kemper Grain and Storage to the Nebraska Department of Environment and Energy. It references the eastern corridor by its registered easement number and describes it as an active drainage buffer. Kemper's own counsel filed it. Kemper signed it." She said, "The third document is the 2014 county maintenance record, which lists the registered easement as the legal basis for county access. Maintenance by any party with legal interest in an easement resets the statutory abandonment period under Nebraska law. The last qualifying maintenance action occurred September 4, 2014. The statutory period has not elapsed." She set the documents down. She said, "The abandonment claim has no legal basis." The room was quiet. The judge looked at Ogle. Ogle said, "Your Honor," the judge said, "the abandonment claim is denied. The 1974 easement is valid and enforceable. Do you want to reschedule for argument, or are we done here?" Ogle's hand went to his phone before he had stood up. Nora called Clara that evening. She said, "They want to negotiate." Clara said, "I know what I want." Nora said, "Tell me." Clara said, "Monthly payment. Permanent easement license. $3,500 a month, adjusted for inflation every 3 years. Transferable to her heirs. 30-year minimum term. No early buyout option." Nora said, "They'll push back." Clara said, "Let them." Ogle pushed back twice. First he said the monthly structure was irregular. Nora said it was the only structure on the table. Then he said the no buyout clause was unreasonable. Nora said the clause was non-negotiable. On the third call he said, "Meridian accepts the terms." Nora called Clara. Clara picked up on the second ring. Nora said, "They took it." Clara said, "Good." She hung up. She walked to the kitchen. Diane was already there. She had heard Clara's side of the call through the thin wall. She turned from the counter and put the kettle on. She did not say anything. Neither did Clara. They had always spoken that way, in the things they didn't need to name. The signing happened on a Thursday at the county clerk's office. Nora sat on one side, Ogle sat on the other. Clara stood at the counter. Sandra, the clerk who had worked that office for 31 years, stamped the agreement without looking up. It was filed at 2:17 p.m. Clara walked out to the parking lot. She sat in the truck, Earl's truck, which she had kept running with her own money, and she opened the brown notebook with Theo's crossed-out name on the cover. She turned to the last page. She wrote, $3,500 a month. Forever. Book 44, page 312. She closed the notebook. She sat in the truck for a while and looked at the clerk's office window. 3 weeks later, Nolan Kemper read 4 paragraphs about the agreement in the Boone County Register over his morning coffee. The reporter had done his homework. The piece mentioned the 1974 easement. It mentioned the 2014 maintenance record. It mentioned the original auction. It mentioned the price. $800. Kemper read it twice. He did not comment. He folded the paper. He left it on the counter. The men who had stood near the coffee pot at that August auction and smiled at his joke were farmers and retired farmers, and two of them still ate breakfast at the same diner on Route 9. One of them saw the register piece. He showed it to the other. Neither of them said much. There was not much to say. The monthly payment hit the Voss family trust account for the first time on April 1st. $3,500. Diane saw the deposit notification on her phone and showed it to Clara without saying anything. Clara looked at it. She handed the phone back. She went to the barn. She opened the drawer under the workbench and took out the old coat. Earl's coat, the one he had been wearing the day he signed the deed at the folding table. The receipt was still folded in the inside pocket. She unfolded it. Boone County Tax Delinquent Land Sale. Lot 22.240 acres. Purchase price $800. Buyer, Voss Family Trust. She folded it back. She put the coat back. Some people collect land. Clara collected the one page nobody thought to read, and then she waited until the world needed it. If you had been in Clara's shoes, would you have taken the $780,000 and walked away, or held out for $3,500 every month for the rest of your life? Tell us in the comments. And if this story got you thinking, you know what to do.